The purchase of expression of interest and nomination forms of the All Progressives Congress, like we told you, it has now ended, and the screening of aspirants is ongoing. In the presidential contest, out of the 28 that purchased forms, only 25 submitted. Well, Arise senior correspondent Ndi Amugo has been keeping tabs on these developments.
April 26, day one of the sale of forms, saw a flurry of activities at the Buhari House, APC Secretariat, as aspirants thronged the office to purchase both the expression of interest forms and nomination forms.
We are here to obtain the form for national chairmanship of this great party, APC, that is invited by our principal, Dr. Senator Abdullahi Adamu.
And I formally present it as evidence that I have paid for the form.
Well, we feel elated that today we have come to submit the winning form.
Saying that the office could not contain the influx of both the aspirants who came to purchase forms and the news hounds who wanted to break or report the news, the officials shifted the event to the International Conference Center.
Adams, Aliu, our big boy, Oshomolu, hereby declare with confidence my desire to contest for the office of the President.
I, Senator Ibikunle Oyelaja Oluwatoyin Akanwo Durorike Mohammed Idli, do ask you, my dear compatriots, particularly members of our great party, the All Progressive Congress, to support my bid for the presidential ticket of our great party, APC.
After some extension of time, the submission of the forms closed on May 13. Before the closing date, speculations were rife about some names being bandied as contenders, but with no clear commitment. One of them was the governor of the central bank, Godwin Emefiele, and then former President Ebele Goodluck Jonathan. The story of his running for the presidency under the APC was all over the media. He was seen smiling and shaking hands with the APC chairman at his house after a meeting that lasted for about an hour. At the end of the day, his name and that of the central bank governor were missing from those that turned in their forms. But 25 that made the final list include Emeka Nwajuba, Yahaya Bello, Roches Okorocha, Dave Umahi, Uju Kennedy Ohanenye, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, Taimbo Jack Rich, and Godwin Akpabio. Others include Kayode Fayemi, Ken Nnamani, Tunde Bakare, Yemi Oshibajo, Rotimi Amechi, Felix Nicholas, Ben Ayade, Obodnaya Ono, and the rest are Abubakar Badaru, Ibukunle Amosu, Robert Ajayi Boniface, Ahmed Yerima, Oladimeji Bankole, Temipre Silva, Ahmed Lawan, Ike Obasimo-Okelu, and the big surprise, Akinwumi Adesina. Temipre Silva withdrew while compiling this report. With the screening process now about to be concluded, all eyes are now on the party for its primaries and congresses. Ndi Amugo, Rise News.
Well, for more on this, I'm joined now by Arise Analyst and Associate Professor of Law, Dr. Sam Amadi. Good to have you on the Arise interview this evening. Well, we're looking at, we're beaming the searchlight on the APC presidential primaries as, of course, the party has fixed May 28th to 30th for the presidential primaries. First off, what intrigues do you think will play out during this primaries? I've heard some analysts say it's going to be a situation where, delegates are going to be bought, and whatever can be bought will be bought,
Including the ground. Well, traditionally, delegates a horse trade. Basically, it's all about buying and selling, one can say. That's the electoral equivalent of a stock market. So some stocks will go up, some will come down. So people are going to buy. But then beyond buying, there's also the fact that delegates are also, there's a principal agent relationship in delegates. Right. So, for example, you saw in Kaduna when both Tinubu and Amechi visited. The governor says, where should we go? They say, where you want us to go. So who should we support? Who you say? So that's a dependency here that many of these delegates are themselves don't have agency. They don't decide where they're going to be, where they're going to go. So some are already captive delegates. So if the governors don't give you a letting, you don't have access to them. Some of the things also that are going to play out is the party leadership. Of course, the delegates and the national delegates will emerge. And then usually candidates will fancy their chance when they look at the combination. So most of the statutory delegates who are party officials or former officials in government seem to be pledged. Where they are going, some people know. But again, those who have retired, like former president, former vice president, former speaker, people like Ken Amadi and them who are going to be delegates as well as candidates, they have some degree of independence to look at who they want. They're not subject to the governor of the state, so they are likely going to be free. So there are going to be 3 kinds of delegates. One are the independent, mature delegates, senators, former Senate presidents, former principal officers, former governors, former party leaders. So they have that independence to look at the candidates and make up their mind. There's also the second category of delegates are those who are officials of government, either at the state or the federal level. So they often go 100% with the governor or whoever controls them. And the third are delegates who are open to be bought and sold. So they come to the convention ground and they're looking at how much they get from the various delegates. Unfortunately, that's what it is. It's a market. So they buy them off. They're cynical about candidates or about their program. So they have built all their career for the last 4 years, waiting for today, waiting for the day of delegate. And so they fancy their chance and they maximize their options. So that's what's going to play out. But then the bigger question there is the so-called Buhari factor. Who does the president want? Or who does the party want? And
is that even predictable at all? Because listening to all the candidates, there's this tendency for each one to believe that they are the anointed, by Buhari. What about the unpredictability of who is likely to actually clinch it within the APC?
The first issue that the Buhari's anointing is also unpredictable. I mean, it's the anointing cup or the anointing bottle kind of moves from one to another. But the truth of the matter is that, look, if you are reasonable in analyzing this anointing, it's some people you would think will be likely candidates for the anointing for 3 factors. One is closeness to the president, trust factor. Again, is their geopolitics, what's more likely to happen. The third is also their grand strength in terms of the party structure, in terms of who has signed up to their campaign. If you look at the teams moving around, you look at, for example, if you look at Tinubu, Amechi, for example, Lawal, Shibanjo, let's say, for example, you can assess within this who has stronger, ground force, who seem to be lining up people who seem to be close to the president. So these are predictors of where the president might go. You still have uncertainty. And again, this game, they say in politics, a day is a century. Anything can happen. So towards the last minute, my sense would be that the president has a sense of who will not succeed him. So whoever falls to that bracket, we know is gone, is a goner, except the person can upset the whole game.
Can you also say he knows who will succeed him?
I think he knows a couple of people he will be likely, he's happy to, it's not one person, there are a couple of people he would be, relaxed, happy, kind of satisfied or somewhat at peace to hand over to. But then,
are there any names that come to mind, and would it matter what their religion is, what their zone is, maybe even structure?
I believe that the president would prefer to have a certain successor because it's a northern candidate, and maybe one of the legacies he wouldn't like to be the president who cynically kind of push the button back to the north. So I think a candidate like Amechi looks good. I think that if you come to the south, it seems to me that people are playing up the Nwajuba card, but a little bit thin on resume, thin on political influence, but on a personality level, yes. A kind of like Ken Amadi.
Well, when you say thin on resume, as far as Emeka Nwajuba is concerned,
comparing him with the people on the ground, he's thin on leadership. For example, he's just honorable member, okay? He didn't even serve that time before he became Minister of State. So his real profile is Minister of State. He had made 2 or 3 attempts to be governor, which were very, is also ran, didn't get any significant vote. So to be fair to him, a bright, smart young man, but still not
with a PhD.
Still not resume in terms of.
And a lawyer?
Yes, that's a smart. Okay, that. So this job is not about all PhDs. If one PhDs line up, maybe none of those guys who are running could run. But the point is, he hasn't got that political machinery. For example, take about Southeast. It's not even a political force. Imo State, where Hope Uzodinma closest, is like the behemoth, okay? You have the Ararumens who are also struggling for space. So in terms of political network, he hasn't got that. Now, if it's only about anointing, if it's only about close to the president, so most people are touting him that, look, he's a youth, so 8 o'clock. The president doesn't look like somebody who is obsessed about youth, okay? If you look at appointment, his friends, he doesn't show that, okay? But closeness, he has been with CPC, he has been with them all along, so that's one point. But if you look at someone like Amechi, for example, who has made investment in the president, who basically, worked against Goodluck Jonathan and turned the tide largely for the president, who he likes, it seems like, who also has strength on ground in terms of who is following him, and who is also 2-time governor, 2-time Speaker of the House of Assembly, and the Minister of Major Ministers. So he has got gravitas on the ground. If you look at someone like Tinubu, not the president's choice, no doubt, but somebody who can win this election any day if you do it in a proper way. If you look at Lawan, a late entry, who is now in my third pick. So by fair and fair election, Tinubu will win this election. By free and fair plus political conditioning, it seems to be that Mechu will likely be the guy. But depending on the political reading, where PDP goes, Lawal could be the guy because
and that seems to be where the APC finds itself in a real quagmire, waiting to see the direction that the PDP will go. Well, the PDP has made it clear that leaving the field open. Does it make it even more difficult and more complex for the APC to decide exactly where the cookie should fall?
It does. It was first. So APC going to do 2 things. With that, let's forget PDP. So we're going to go likely south, okay? Right. So, and in this contention is southeast, southwest, southwest. It seems to be that in terms of strength on ground, the south candidate now, Amechi, and the southwest candidates, Tinubu largely, and the Shibanjo, and in some respect, Amosu and Fayemi, who I don't think are that strong, are stronger than the southeast candidates in terms of structure, muscle, in terms of party structure, financing, and positioning, okay? Right. But if you're looking at who is more acceptable, sellable, maybe a candidate like Namani could appeal across all board, okay? But then, so the PDP are going to, if PDP go north and take a candidate like Atiku, or a candidate like Tambuwa, who most likely would be a much more acceptable candidate across the party divide. Now, if he emerges, it will be difficult, analytically, it will be difficult for APC to win the northern vote, which is an important vote, against such a candidate, Atiku or a Tambuwa, in my sense, to the strong.
Or any northerner, for that matter.
Well, some northerners are weak, but yes, even a Bala who is weak, in my view, or a Saraki, who will not carry that level of momentum in the final. But a Tambuwa and a Atiku will be very tough nut. It's very a Tambuwa that will also appeal across other zones. Now, if that happens, APC will be faced with, if you take a south, which south will create that momentum? Now, the argument for APC and southern APC is that with the APC control most of northern states than PDP. So APC is stronger numerically, governmentally in the north than PDP. But the problem is, look, this election will tend to carry a lot of undertone of ethnicity, religion, and what happened in Sokoto and what's going on now.
What are the implications of that? I mean, where you have religion, ethnicity, and even culture, you know.
What I mean is that people, theoretically, you know, from scholars say that people vote more from identity than from policy, which means when people vote, they vote who they are and who they like, who's like us, however that like is. The poor, Marxist, socialist, capitalist, business people, okay? So when Dangote is voting, he likely votes somebody like who is Dangote. So if Dangote is more concerned about his entrepreneurship, maybe his choice will be somebody who will drive entrepreneurship.
Yes.
If he's concerned about his Hausa Fulani or Muslim background, maybe his choice will be somebody who, if not a Muslim Fulani, but somebody who will be more amenable likable, tolerable, and does not. So even the US, so identity is critical here, and that's the problem with Nigeria. With no issue, this election has not thrown up any policy issue. Apart from restructuring.
That's the point.
Exactly.
Is it a reflection of what we're seeing? Because from all the candidates, I don't know about you, are you hearing about the issues? Are you hearing how they will tackle the challenges of insecurity, violent crimes springing up here and there? Boko Haram seems to be weakened, but other, violent groups are springing up, by the day, whether you're talking about the northeast, northwest, and other parts of the country.
We're not hearing that conversation.
Is it a surprise that we're not hearing?
It's a surprise because we are in the most terrible situation in terms of economy, in terms of national unity, in terms of governance failure. We talked about that, Content General of the Federation, the government underwriter for transparency.
Yeah.
Is now being docked for 80 billion. So these are bad moments that you should expect some kind of issue-based politics, high-energy politics, where people are debating issues. To be fair, Peter Obi has been a leader in this field. He has spoken, even though there's some monotony around his campaign messaging, which is basically about
moving Nigeria from a consumer economy to a productive one.
We've not seen much of the policy direction, the roadmap to that. But credit to him, he has been much more innovative, much more issue-based. We're not hearing those issues. And so what that suggests to me is that, look, Nigeria might fall back to the old type of politics, which is primarily identity-based and network-based. So if you have some individuals line up behind you, patron-client relationship, voters vote according to patronage, this is our man, they vote for him. And so that's why PDP, APC will be a little bit in a confusion. They need to say, how do we counter a PDP if they bring a strong northern candidate and maybe hypothetically wrong with a southeast
I'm surprised you're saying this. Okay, you just mentioned southeast, and that brings me to the point of why there seems to be a waning of the call for a southeast emergence for 2023. Do you agree? I mean, you have Orji Kalu, for example, who's pulled out of the race, saying that he'll support. He actually said he wouldn't mind being a sweeper at Aso Rock if an Ahmed Lawan becomes president. What does that say to you about this whole call, for a southeast presidency?
You're right to say that the southeast call for presidency has been waning politically. See, it was a call on justice. It was a call on equity, a call on patriotism. That means transcending real politics. But the Nigerian political class didn't pick it up, okay? So you see, Afenifere, Pandev, some of us civil society people, I was one of the first who said, look, if you want to zone to the south, zone to southeast. If you don't go to the southeast, there's nothing like south. It's a fraud in this framework. That's my view. Yeah. Now, they have not been able to drive that politics. So there's no political ownership of this sense of justice. And you have a repercussion. You see, Nigeria doesn't end with 2023. The question is, what happens after the election? So you're right. The southeast case didn't get mainstreamed politically. The PDP avoided it. APC avoided it. The political leaders on the south and the north didn't come together like the civil society group, Afenifere, Pandev, Middlebelt, southern leaders were all saying justice requires a southeast. So,
can they even carry out?
Lost out in political, dynamics.
Can those groups you've mentioned, Pandev, Middle Belt Forum, and all of those, can they carry out their threat that any of the two major political parties, the ruling party and the opposition PDP, if they don't field a southeast candidate, they will boycott it? Can they carry out the plan?
They will try. I mean, there's also some messaging going around asking for that to happen. It might discourage voting in the southeast particularly, and then it creates a legitimacy question around outcome. I don't think they're trying to be enough to stop INEC from going out with the election. Two things can happen. Assuming there was a total boycott in the southeast, which I doubt, because the governors themselves have incentive to enforce election or try to encourage election, except there's a violent pushback. So elections will happen, but let's assume there was none. So the question around 2/3, 25% of 2/3 states, 12 2/3, would be a question that may be difficult to answer. So that could be first crisis, constitutional crisis. The second constitutional crisis will be that even if you satisfy the conditions to be declared the president, whether APC or PDP, the question of illegitimacy docks that government. So you saw Buhari government struggling for legitimacy in South is because of the 95 97.5% rhetoric, even though the election was not boycotted. So imagine where the South is boycott, even if it is a failed boycott, even if it is not complete boycott, it will leave the next government with heavy burden of legitimacy. And so the answer is, even if the political dynamics will not favor a Southeast president, as I think it may not, going by the dynamics that's playing out politically, there should be some political consensus that something should be done about the Southeast, because the Southeast is festering in terms politically, and even if they don't win the presidency, as they may not, but then you are risking that a significant part of your country will continually doubt the legitimacy of your governance. So there should be some political contraption or device to try to satisfy that question. I think that politics,
and I wonder how that question
a game of
can be
unknown
satisfied.
may not. I mean, even if you have a case, politics may not all the time solve that problem. So the best would have been a Southeast president, but it may not work because of the other dynamics. So even if it doesn't work, there should be some engagement with that question. So the political party should be wrestling with the idea: what do we do? For example, restructuring. People, if the parties pledge to real action on substantive restructuring, it might happen that even Southeasterners wouldn't bother who becomes the next president, because essentially some of the questions around justice, equity, and structural imbalance would have been taken care of. So those are some of the give and takes that could compensate for political missing, the lack of mainstreaming of Southeast case in 2023 politics.
Okay, just before we wrap this, the issue of consensus is looking more and more likely that would occur within the APC. And some analysts are saying, with a consensus, there is a likelihood that a northerner may emerge, that all the southerners that are, showing interest and all of that, it may just give way to a northern emergence.
You see, the problem that politically, even if there's no consensus, if the APC gets to ethnic regional politics, the North will have the way, because the South will share their votes if there's no people who submit, who pull out of the race. We've seen people pull out. I don't know who will pull out. But see how consensus will work. I think some of the candidates will probably pledge themselves to other candidates when they see the dynamics change. And so if we're left with 3 or 4 real candidates who are strong, likely to win, then the question will now be, can the party string a consensus, others step down? Or would the party have all these parties, others step down for one person, and then they face a behemoth? What I think will happen.
What do you think will happen?
I think what will happen is that we're going to have most of the candidates do the horse trading, step down, but there will be a Tinubu who will not step down. And the question
he has said, I don't know where others are running to, but I am running to.
He's the real guy who is running this election. I mean, fully committed. Not that he'll win or he should win.
On the basis of what, really? His deep pocket, structure?
On the basis of investment. He's a real politician. He has built this party. He has built a structure from AD and up to now AC. So basically, he had wanted this job badly. He has worked for it. He has created a network. He has a network to drive. And the big pocket, again, ego. He has invested himself in. So what other job, what is the compensation? Will he go run for Senate? Is he going to run for governor? Is he going to step? And if he doesn't become president in 2023, he is bound to slide, because as the wave is going down, so some of his aides have left him. He's now more of an isolated character. So after 2023, Tinubu will be a diminished character, except he hangs on to some NGO work or some of his, because if he had these guys with him, they would be the ones throwing the name up, but they have had quarters. He has to.
What do you think is responsible for that? I mean, he's been known as, being the man who's behind the rise of so many politicians who have risen up to becoming vice president. Is it something wrong with his politics, or is the fault with the guys?
I think it's what
who have pulled back from him.
I think it's partly him. Ambition has a price to pay, and then when ambition chokes those other people, and when you're not sensitive to what their people want. For example, there are some, take for example, somebody like Fikuyemi who wanted to go for secretary or so, and because he could conflict with going to president. So some of those deals he has made, and some of those ways he has managed these plum jobs in the Southwest, maybe creates this disaffection. And again, also partly the guys themselves, they begin to see opportunity, like Ifeanyi, for example. I also want to be president. I mean, he has always wanted to be president. And so being a governor through the help of Tinubu, now seeing the coast he could be president, he feels that he has to part ways. Or Shibanjo, for example, who got to this job, primarily or principally on the back of his association with Tinubu, whether Tinubu recommended or not, but the association with Tinubu. And then the VP is close to presidency, and so maybe at the point start thinking about, how not me? I've got maybe better credential, I have better profile, better qualifications, so I could be a president. So these are some of the things that make it difficult now that Tinubu is isolated, and this is his last chance to build an empire he wanted as president. If he loses, he has to, you know, accept that, look, the road is downward.
And in spite of being isolated, he still has a chance. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that
and
if you do the vote
talk
today,
that there's a possibility that he could, you know, go to the SDP if he doesn't pick the ticket.
The problem with going to SDP is that most of the parties have not looked at the Electoral Act well. It seemed to me that by submitting the electoral register and INEC verifying it, what that means therefore is that anybody who becomes a member of a party after this deadline is not a member of the party for the purpose of the election. So if you join another party a day after you've lost the primary, you just wonder which membership you're not qualified. INEC has said submit all before 30 days. So what that means that is a record INEC will use. So if anybody wins election and his name is not on the record of a political party as a member, he is not a member to qualify for election. So I don't think they look at that. So I think they are stuck. I think he's stuck. He has to fight dirty, like I said, fight hard, win this.
Rougher, like we say in this part.
Absolutely. If he doesn't win it, then he has to grapple or make peace with the fact that, look, whoever becomes the president, Shuaju will not be the same as Shuaju, because most of his guys have left him, unfortunately, and therefore they can't build that kind of memorial or that kind of build him up as the father.
How much of a burden do you think the legacy for the APC, of course, including for the president himself, President Muhammadu Buhari, to deliver a free, fair, and credible election?
I think Buhari's greatest legacy will be just that, because one, due to his fault or not his fault, the economy didn't do well, the COVID, everything, politically we didn't do well. Corruption, we've seen the test now, badly, worse than we were before. So the only thing Buhari can secure for himself is that, just like Jonathan did, he's going to redeem himself by having an election. And best of all will be an election which his party deservedly is defeated.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sam Amadi, Arise News Analyst, for joining us on the Arise interview and, as usual, brilliant insights. Thank you very much for joining us.